Welcome, everyone. Can you believe it? We are at season 6 of National Park Presents. Season 6! I can't hear all of your cheering, but I'm imagining it's going something like lots of wooing. You know, I love a woo. This is my all-time favorite program. I tell you all the time to not tell the other programs, but at this point, they know. Just like how I'm my mom's favorite. This is absolute my favorite. Today is our very first of 6 presentations of this season. We will begin here today and we'll go every other Wednesday, all the way to the end of March. So there will be 6 presentations. This program did start in our branches. So if you were familiar, about 7 years ago, probably, is when we're all going to branches and all trying to see them all in person. But then the pandemic happened and we switched to Zoom and then we stayed online because we always say programmers like us and national parks will adapt to the people and you guys went online, so we went online. So I'm really happy that you guys have joined us and continue to join us every year. It really means a lot. The BPL this year is slowly marching its way to the 250th anniversary of the Revolution. A couple years ago, we were focused on revolutionary music. Last year, we're focused on revolutionary art. And this year, we're just doing all things revolutionary. All right. If there is a anniversary, we're going to celebrate it. All right. And if it's a revolutionary idea, we're going to celebrate that too. All right. All things from that time period. And it's just a really fun time. All righty. We're going to go over a few boring Zoom features. You will notice that the chat box is gone. We did need to, unfortunately, try a different path. So if you have questions this time around, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. All right. It looks like a little box with a question mark in it. And it says Q&A. When you click on it, you can type in your question. Ranger Sean is moderating in the back. And so he's going to collect your questions. And at the end of Ranger John's presentation, he's going to pop on the screen and ask them per usual. The small change is that we no longer have the little communal box. So yes, let's see. 2 other things are we are recording. Isn't that so much fun? Not so much about like this intro, but don't worry, my intros get cut out. So if you want to see this presentation again or share it with a friend, you're like, this was amazing. You won't have to hear me ramble. It starts usually at the presentation. They are on the Boston Public Library YouTube page. So if you go to BPL YouTube, usually is the best way. Just Google it, and it'll be right there. Usually the latest presentations are at the very top, but we did notice Sean's presentation from last year. I believe it was Life Liberty. His is at the very end of that playlist. I don't know why, but it is video 35 and check it out. Technology never works sometimes when you need it to, but it is there. One last thing. Oh, if you don't like the captions here, you can absolutely get rid of them. There's the box below. It says CC, that stands for closed captions. You can click on that and I believe it says hide subtitles. And at the very end, I will be sending out a survey just to hear about your thoughts. All right, my loves, that was a lot from me, so I'm going to stop babbling. So let's give a giant welcome to Ranger Sean as he presents Benedict Arnold, the trial and contributions of an early patriot.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully, everyone can hear me loudly and clearly. My name is Ranger John. On behalf of the National Park Service and the Boston Public Library, I'd like to welcome you to our program tonight. And the topic, Benedict Arnold. Chances are, as you heard that name, you didn't picture a hero. You instead pictured a traitor. Today, his name is not just a historical figure. It's very much an insult. It's shorthand for betrayal, but here's a problem with that. During the American Revolution, before treason, Benedict Arnold was widely regarded as one of the most daring aggressive, and effective commanders in the Patriot cause. In fact, George Washington once warned the Continental Congress that without Arnold, the most disagreeable consequences may be apprehended. Lord George Germain will even write, he has shown himself the most enterprising man among the rebels. A Saratoga veteran fighting alongside Arnold is even quoted, made heroes of all within his influence. So that raises an uncomfortable question. How does a man praised by Washington, feared by the British, and adored by his soldiers become the revolution's most infamous villain? Tonight, we're not here to excuse the treason, but we are here to understand reputation, how it's built, how it fractures, and how history decides what we remember. Throughout this program, I invite you to think about the following. How does a hero become remembered as a traitor? And what does that say about the American Revolution and about us? Benedict Arnold, he is born into privilege and he's raised in decline. In fact, here we are talking about him on his actual birthday. So we'll give a quick shout out to the man himself. Happy birthday. January 14th, 1741, Norwich, Connecticut. He enters this world to the parents, Benedict Arnold and Hannah Waterman King. His family had once been prominent in Connecticut society. But by Arnold's youth, that reputation had collapsed under debt, alcoholism, public embarrassment. Arnold grew up watching what happened when honor disappears. And that matters. From a young age, Arnold learned that reputation was everything, and that once lost, it might never return. As a young man, Arnold will have to rebuild what his family had lost. And he will be quite successful at that. Through relentless work, sharp instincts, he became a successful merchant. He will own multiple ships. He'll trade horses, lumber, wool, and rum throughout the Atlantic world. He will even run a successful apothecary, really building himself back up from that despair. And even by the early 1770s, things are looking much brighter for Arnold. He's definitely looked upon and considered one of the wealthiest men in all of New Haven, Connecticut in the early 1770s. And the people, they knew him. They knew him as bold. They knew him as fearless. They knew him as a man not to be crossed. Arnold was quick to duel people who dishonored him. There's a widely shared story. As a captain in the Caribbean, he's down there on business. Another captain seems to have slighted his honor, so Arnold challenges him to a duel. And as the challenged, his opponent will get to fire first. He will miss. Arnold fires. He does not miss. He clips the shoulder. And by the rules of dueling, that should be all. It should be done. The honor should be avenged. Not for Benedict. He starts reloading the weapon, and he hints to his opponent to do just the same. As the opponent looks on scared, all Arnold has to say is, I give you notice. If you miss again, I will kill you. And with that, well, that was enough for the gentleman to rescind his insult. Arnold accepted that apology and they moved on. But a fine example as a man quick with that temper and will not take no for an answer if he feels that honor has not been avenged. But he also enforces his own justice, even right back here in the American colonies. In one infamous incident, after discovering a sailor under his command by the name of Peter Bowles went and attempted to report him for smuggling, well, Arnold had approached him, kind of told him, "You should get lost. It's time for you to go." The man doesn't really take that too seriously, and Arnold receives word later on that this man, he's still in town. He's off having a drink in the tavern. Arnold is furious. He's going to march down to that tavern, along with some other sailors under his command. Will grab the man right out of that tavern, takes him to the town whipping post. They begin flogging him, and then they'll chase him right on out of town. Peter Bowles got the message then. He certainly did not return. Before this, it will not go unnoticed by the townspeople, and Arnold is fined by none other than Roger Sherman, a resident Connecticut man and future signer for the Declaration of Independence. Arnold's fine with that fine. He pays it unapologetically, no remorse at all, because he'll continue to go on voicing and displaying how his feelings. He will lead bonfire protests against those he considered too timid to stand up to British authority. He even attacked them in the newspaper by name. Nothing really was off limits. But from that moment forward, Arnold wore the mantle of the champion of the ordinary citizen. They certainly took notice. Here's a man willing to act when others merely complained. But here's the warning sign. Arnold did not distinguish between personal honor and public authority. To him, being right mattered more than being restrained. Benedict Arnold, he will begin his service in the war as a captain in the Connecticut militia, a position to which he is elected in March 1775. And he will soon be tasked with leading a charge to take Fort Ticonderoga. But it all starts on the road to Cambridge. In April 1775, Arnold leads a company of militiamen from New Haven to the forces quickly surrounding Boston and gathering around in Cambridge. There's 150 miles total to go. He's going to average 20 miles a day with his men, certainly wanting to get there and take part. En route, he will cross paths with a fellow Connecticut patriot, one Samuel Parsons. He's returning from just that location, Cambridge, and he's got news for Arnold. He says, no matter your arrival there, there's no difference to be made without some artillery. It simply is too much of a stalemate. And for Arnold, that's kind of good news to hear, because he knows exactly where to find some. He knows that Fort Ticonderoga is loaded with them. So on his way finishing the walk to Cambridge, he will formulate that plan. He's going to lay it all out, set up the approach, and upon arriving in Cambridge, 2 days later, he will propose to the Massachusetts Committee just that plan. And with that plan, the committee doesn't take long to approve it. They truly like that. They give him the approval. They provide him with the supplies, give him the equipment, even give him some money and a line of credit. The only thing he must really do from here on out is draw up the recruits. He's given a quota of 400 he can fill, and he's to do that out in the western part of Massachusetts. So, with that in mind, Arnold is eager and ready to go. And he begins. But Samuel Parsons, well, he finishes his journey on the opposite direction. He winds up back in Hartford. And it's there he tells the influential patriots of the town just what Arnold was thinking. Because even he had to admit on his walk back that that's a pretty good idea. Thinking if there's can to be had and we can get it, we should. And the Hartford delegates, they also agree. Just like Massachusetts committee, they will issue an order for a force to be drawn up, and their goal, the exact same as Benedict Arnold. They at once get this expedition together, and they're on the way. But there's still chaos to come. With three very different outfits now converging on the fort, confusion is all but inevitable. Benedict Arnold, he's in command of the Massachusetts men. He's to drum up them and begin. Edward Mott is given the task of drawing up the support for Connecticut. They have the soldiers already set up. His orders are a little bit more unofficial. Arnold certainly carries a little bit more weight. But the men the Connecticut boys have, it's about a few dozen. So their plan, they will invite Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain boys. Now, when Arnold learns of this plan by Mott and Allen to work together, well, he's quite mad. He's going to race to confront them from Western Massachusetts as quickly as he can to meet up with them, essentially leaving behind his quota of soldiers. He is still trying to draw that up. He finally is able to catch up to them at their embarkation point, which is just across the area of Fort Ticonderoga, right there on Lake Champlain. Now, Arnold catches up, and the three commanders, they have to gather, and they have to hash this out to figure out what exactly is going on, what is happening. Now, there's no denying the validity of Arnold's Massachusetts commission, yet he has no physical troops. They're all still down there in Western Mass. While Allen, he's got a couple hundred under his command, good, loyal men. Mott, he's got some Connecticut soldiers and even some Massachusetts men under his command, but they number but a few dozen, less than 100. But for some of Mott's men, as they're being or hailing from Massachusetts, they do have a conundrum. Do they honor their own colony and follow Arnold under Massachusetts? Or they continue their volunteer support of Connecticut and continue following under Mott? Well, the Massachusetts men, the leaders of these groups, there are two men by the name of James Easton and John Brown. And you'll hear these names said again, as they will clash with Arnold again in the future, becoming key components. But for now, Ethan Allen, he steps forward. He's got the most men, but he also already has a bounty on his head from the colony of New York. As the leader of the Green Mountain Boys trying to fight for Vermont independence, he's ruffled some feathers with the New York legislature. So, a wanted man, and not wanting to ruffle any more feathers, he doesn't want to add Massachusetts to that list, so he relents and goes with joint command. But only his men put a quick end to that. Their loyalty was admired, but perhaps their loyalty went a bit too strong. They will follow absolutely no one but Ethan Allen. In fact, if Ethan Allen is not leading in some capacity, they're going to turn around and leave. They simply do not care. And with them goes any real fighting force to use in the attack. So Arnold, knowing he needs Allen's troops, knowing the element of surprise, it will not last long. Only a matter of time before the British in that fort will know of their movements. So he relents. For Arnold, he will retain command of the Massachusetts men, while Allen continues leading the Green Mountain Boys. And now Easton and Brown, the two gentlemen I mentioned earlier, well, their status now diminishes, and they go along with this. Their role has shrunk, but it leads to some deep resentment that they will hold against Arnold. The actual assault upon Fort Ticonderoga, though, is really more a farce than a feat. The assault force is going to be 250 strong. They're going to cross the lake just opposite the fort, but a shortage of boats and strong winds that night, well, they slowed the attack tremendously. And with dawn fast approaching in these early morning hours, well, the two commanders, they choose to carry on the attack with only a third of those 250. The rest will simply have to join up as they come along. Well, they will rush into the fort with about 80 men through the rickety gate and into that courtyard, shouting for surrender. The garrison is sleepily taken off guard, and they surrender in under 10 minutes. Without bloodshed, and 40 British troops are captured, along with a number of women and children. Those cannon, though, that were the whole goal, they would later be hauled by Henry Knox right down here to Boston to force the British evacuation. But Arnold's reward, it's resentment. James Easton, John Brown, Ethan Allen, men who would clash with Arnold again and again. From the very beginning, Arnold learned a hard lesson. Victory did not guarantee gratitude. Benedict Arnold, though, he will be part of the army that is setting off to capture Quebec and turn Canada into the 14th colony. He, alongside Richard Montgomery, who's been tasked by Philip Schuyler, commander of the Northern Department, to act in his stead, they are to lead attacks together against the walled city of Quebec. First, however, Benedict Arnold must reach Canada, and that proves to be beyond the reach of simple. Arnold sets out with a troop strength of just over 1,000 men, and all of them are filled with a good degree of excitement, ready to get on the road, ready to get on an expedition, excited to have a role in this war. And they're going to head out from roughly Gardner, Maine, just north of Augusta, along the Kennebec River, using meandering waterways and portage sites there to traverse the rugged Maine wilderness. The maps used, well, they were at best outdated and inaccurate. Distance from Gardner to Quebec, well, it's 300 miles. The maps they used showed it at only 180. So already off to a bad start. Arnold estimates the total journey will be 3 weeks' time, putting them within Quebec by mid-October. The first sign of real trouble, though, occurs only 50 miles into the journey. Many of the bateaux, flat-bottomed craft, common here in North America for waterway navigation, well, they're coming apart quickly, and they're only meant for a one-way trip. But repairing them just to go that one way is going to cost valuable time. Even worse, the water had gotten into those boats, ruining much of their provisions. The generous 45-day supply, it's already been dangerously dwindled, only 50 miles in. On top of that, nighttime temperatures are dropping to a point of frost. Soldiers are constantly soaked, freezing, and falling ill. By October 8th, the last of the troops are set to pull out of Norwich Falls, the first encampment they made, leaving Gardner. But as if the heavens decided, let's make your trip a bit worse. Torrential rain unloads. The men simply will not see another dry or warm day again for a long time. And this will make traversing what they call the Great Carrying Place nigh impossible. There's a series of ponds used connecting them from the Kennebec River to the Dead River along their journey. The men, they were sinking knee deep in mud, hidden roots, trees. They were tearing up shins, ripping apart shoes. And the weather, it only worsened. Following the heavy rains came howling winds and blistering snows. Trees were toppling, one will even fall and kill a soldier. By October 20th, the last of Arnold's men finally reached the Dead River. Now, that's the day he had hoped to be already outside Quebec City, so already knows he is well behind schedule. But more food and supplies are lost, they're ruined because of rising water levels on the Dead River. Soldiers, they're already on half rations. They're essentially on no rations now. Arnold does his best in keeping morale up, but when it seemed nothing worse could possibly happen, it does. October 21st, a hurricane is going to roar through Maine. Things are so bad at this point, Arnold calls together a council of war. On October 23rd, he sits down there knowing he has orders from Washington that the mission is to be aborted rather than risk the loss of the entire force. They take stock. Men are very near edge, very little food remains, major quantities of supplies are lost, no winter clothing. Scouts from ahead bring back grim news. They are nowhere near Quebec. The list goes on and on. But the choice is still made to push forward to Quebec. But Arnold will push on ahead of his men in order to secure food for them. And he reaches the first settlement on October 30th and begins doing just that. But while he's ahead, more news is breaking from behind and the situation is getting worse. All but one of his subordinates commanding his units agree to move forward and do so. One, Colonel Roger Enos, will decide to turn around and return back where they started, taking with him 300 men. So when they do finally reach their destination, that troop strength is only 60%, 650 out of near 1,000 men. But the praise still is pouring in for Benedict Arnold for completing such an extraordinary feat. Arnold had done the impossible, and he remembered it. But Benedict Arnold, he is on the plains of Abraham, just outside Quebec City. He's there to probe the British defenses in hopes of finding an opening. He's finally reached the city. He's ready to attack. But the British, they won't be goaded into that attack. They stay resolved. They remember history going back to the French and Indian War. Arnold even laments, had he been but 10 days earlier, he could have taken it. He wasn't too far off, given the British reinforcements for the city arrived just within that frame itself. But Richard Montgomery, the kind of co-commander under Schuyler, he takes Montreal on November 13th, and that brings good news, because he will link up with Arnold, and he will bring forces and reinforcement, artillery pieces, and a bonus, captured, warm British uniforms for Arnold's troops. But the New England troops under Montgomery's command, with the onset of winter, ready to halt campaigning, they begin to head home. And it does include men like James Easton, same guy who had beef with Arnold going back to Ticonderoga. But in total, Montgomery is only able to muster about 450 soldiers to move on Quebec. So a total fighting force of around 1,300 will camp outside the city in early December. Richard Montgomery will assume overall command, with Arnold next in line. Time was not on their side anymore, though. One way or another, Quebec City had to be taken. Many enlistments for their men were due to expire at the end of the year, on January 1st. For the British, they will not lose any men. They have nowhere to go. And they can fully expect reinforcements when the spring thaw arrives, bringing new soldiers from England. The winter weather is going to lead to a dramatic rise in sickness for the colonial forces and even lead to a small breakout of the smallpox. So starting December 5th, colonial forces, they gather on the plains of Abraham, ready to begin the assault. And over the next couple of weeks, both sides are exchanging artillery fire with little impact on the British garrison itself. The assault will finally come on December 31st, 1775 at 4 a.m. The assault is to occur at night amidst falling snow as cover. Now, Quebec City is divided into two sections. The upper town, sitting atop the cliffs, behind the wall, facing the plains of Abraham, and your lower town, nestled narrowly on a shelf of land between your riverbanks and the cliff bottom. Montgomery's original plan was to penetrate the west wall of the upper town, while all other troops poked at the flanks in an effort to divert his attack. Well, he hastily revises this just days before the assault. The new plan calls for attacks to both ends of the lower town. Both forces will link up and take the upper town together from the rear. Arnold attacks the north end, while Montgomery attacks the south end. Any remaining troops not involved in the attack are to threaten the upper with any diversions possible. Well, Richard Montgomery, he's able to get past the blocks of river ice, his first obstacle being tossed in his way. Gets past a couple man-made obstructions before he finally comes to an open area with a blockhouse at the end of it. But unable to tell if it was manned or not, he's already behind schedule. He chooses to charge. He raises his sword, grabs what men he can, and he takes off. Well, that blockhouse is manned by soldiers with muskets and small cannons. They open fire just when the Americans get close enough. That opening blast stops the attack in its track. It kills, it kills Montgomery outright and creates confusion in the ranks. The next senior officer present, Colonel Donald Campbell, he surveys the bloody scene, orders retreat almost instantly back to the plains of Abraham. The blockhouse, though, it could have been flanked, and Montgomery charged forward with less than the bulk of his force. So had they regrouped, they possibly could have gotten around. Benedict Arnold, though, unknowingly, is all alone in attack. But he is less hindered by ice than Montgomery, but unlike his counterpart, he meets enemy resistance the moment he reaches the city. His route approaching that city, it wedges his troops just up against the wall of the upper town, and musket fire is raining down from the parapets above. Arnold, upon approaching his first barrier, he calls up their he will get through the he comes up to his first barrier, calls up a sled mounted artillery piece to blast a hole in the structure when he is hit with a ricochet bullet from a musket volley. He is stunned, he is bleeding heavily, he is unable to stand and carried to the rear by his men. Daniel Morgan, he carries on the attack, but he will simply be captured. Darkness, horrible weather, typical confusion of battle, absence of Arnold all leads to one result. The American attack lost all momentum. Of the attacking force of 1,300, almost 500 of them are killed, wounded, or captured. But praise, once again, is going to pour in for Benedict Arnold and his role in this, albeit disaster, but still a very effective, morale installation for his troops. But Arnold, he notices a pattern. The recognition is coming after he is wounded, not for planning, not for endurance, not for sacrifice. That matters to him. In summer 1776, Benedict Arnold is building a makeshift fleet on Lake Champlain, and his purpose is to confront Guy Carleton and his forces coming out of the Highlands, connecting through the waterways of Canada to New York and New England. He hoped for a fleet of 30 warships. He's going to get at most 15. But the British fleet, they're going to outgun, outclass, and outtrain him. But an even worse problem for Arnold is finding the proper crew to man these vessels he is building. Only a handful respond to Arnold's plea for volunteers. The rest are filled by the army. Often misfits or force-reluctant soldiers are sent. Arnold angry at the results, but he knows he must carry on. He begins moving his ships on August 24th, 1776, south. In early September, he's going to anchor his ships in battle formation on Lake Champlain. Valcourt Island is going to be the chosen location for the battle. It's going to roughly be midway between the north and south ends of the lake. It was close to the western shore, offering a natural redoubt. By the end of September 1776, Arnold's growing worried that the biggest ships he needed are not ready, but that worry is put to rest when they do finally arrive. By October 11th, battle is to commence. Arnold will lead the 3 rogue galleys and 1 schooner that he has out fighting towards the British once they realize they have sailed beyond him. And when they come back to fight, he pushes forward, pokes the British, retreats back, and draws them into battle. Had the British waited and used their long guns, it could have made a much better difference. Again, they outgunned and outclassed the Americans on the water by far. But their pride is pricked. So they go forward, they charge, and Arnold, within musket range for hours, they are exchanging fire. The Americans are getting wrecked. By nightfall, the British are done. Their big ships have finally arrived, but they're too late. But for Arnold, his actions are not done. For Guy Carleton, he is trying to finish him off the next day. He is going to be unable to do so as Arnold will slip out under the cover of darkness just in enough opening, knowing his ships can go through those narrow drafts. While Carleton chases him down, he's furious. He attacks Arnold once again, just north of Fort Ticonderoga. Arnold will have to ram his ship, run it aground, set it ablaze, all to escape the British, but not before taking yet another beating at the hands of the British ship, the Inflexible. Arnold again is limping across the decks, hands up, sword raised, seen all across the deck, leading his men very heroically. But Carleton, he has no more stomach to campaign. With Arnold now out of reach, he sees there's no other course of action but to fall back to Canada. Winter is setting on. Arnold, tactical defeat, but certainly a strategic victory. In early July 1777, General Arthur Sinclair surrenders Fort Ticonderoga to General John Burgoyne's 8,000 strong army out of Canada. That opens up the Hudson River Valley once again for a ripe attack for the British and total control. Arnold is called yet again to the forefront to play a role in preventing this. Only this time, he is under command with Horatio Gates, who was once a friend, but now an enemy, now a detractor. And Arnold and Gates, they have some personal disdain for each other. But leading up to facing John Burgoyne just outside of Saratoga, New York, he gives command to Arnold of his left wing. He knows his troops need a battle-tested commander, despite it having to be Arnold. Well, the first day's battle arrives on September 19, 1777. the First Battle of Saratoga, Freeman's Farm. Burgoyne begins the day by probing the defensive lines. Arnold sees this. He wants to attack. He pleads with Gates, please let me. Gates is sitting back. He wants to see how it lays out and plays out. Arnold says, no, please let me go. And Gates relents. Arnold charges into battle with his men, crashing right into the British flank, pushing them back, causing chaos. Burgoyne even has to bring more of his center column and even his, right flank into battle. And when Arnold sees this, that the whole British line is moving across the open field with an entire third of the American army not used, well, he races back to Gates, says, please use the troops, send them in, attack. Now's the time where we can turn the tide. Gates says, here's a company, this is all you're getting, but you're going to stay behind. I don't want you out there leading it. And with that, this battle essentially falls apart. The British, they take a beating, they take a mauling, but they recover. They build themselves some redoubts. Over the next couple of weeks, Burgoyne is awaiting reinforcements from New York City from General Henry Clinton. If they arrive, he's going to continue to push on. Unbeknownst to him, Henry Clinton is unable to get those reinforcements up to him. And by October 7th, 1777, the second and final fight, the Battle of Saratoga, it's just John Burgoyne going against Horatio Gates once again. And this battle came to be known as the Battle of Bemis Heights. Began just the same as Freeman's Farm, the British poking the defenses, only this time there's no Arnold in command. It is now Daniel Morgan. But he too pleads to attack from Gates, the British. He's giving orders to, he unloads, and he pushes the British back. They will regroup, and they are sitting there in kind of a stalemate now. Will now enter Benedict Arnold, riding as if out of a Hollywood movie, rallying his troops, ready to go, turning the tide of battle. He's able to charge in the British lines, push them back into their redoubts, and upon arriving at those redoubts, he helps lead a charge directly into it and receives direct line of fire with another bullet striking the same leg wounded at Quebec and causing him to fall with his horse, mortally wounded, falling right on top and crushing that leg. But once again, Benedict Arnold is seen right at the forefront of the fighting, in the thick of it, not afraid, ready to go and serve this cause. He is getting that praise, but even later, he reportedly tells his good friend Henry Dearborn at the battle, I wish the musket ball had struck my heart instead. We're already seeing his decline from the Patriot cause. The court martial, the final straw. The court martial is going to stem from 8 charges brought against Benedict Arnold by Joseph Reed and his allies. Reed was a former aide to Washington and governor of Pennsylvania. He had demanded, or Arnold, had demanded a prompt reckoning for this court martial. But Congress declined to support him, and Reed repeatedly requested delays, hoping to gather evidence to substantiate these accusations. These postponements appear calculated to prolong Arnold's ordeal and raise an obvious question. Why were the charges filed in early 1779 if the evidence was not yet in hand? The court martial itself did not convene until December 1780, January 1781. Arnold was ultimately acquitted of 6 of the 8 charges. He was found at fault on only 2 points. First, allowing a vessel to clear the port of Philadelphia while it was officially closed, a ship in which Arnold had a financial interest. And second, using public wagons to transport his own trade goods. Arnold acknowledged the latter charge and had paid for the wagon's use. Now, George Washington, meanwhile, he acquiesced to Reed's repeated delays, largely out of necessity. For Reed threatened to withhold the Pennsylvania militia from Washington's military efforts, unless he was given that time to assemble his case. Washington, despite attempting to Mull it over, trying to protect Arnold. He believed he simply could not risk losing critical manpower. Court martial board ultimately goes forward and recommends that Arnold receive a public reprimand, assigning the task to Washington. Washington carried it out in the mildest way possible, through orders of the day. No further punishment was to follow. Yet for Arnold, the damage was done. Even Washington now appeared complicit in his humiliation. In an effort to mend the relationship, Washington offered Arnold a command within the Continental Army, but it's one Arnold refused outright, instead insisting on command at West Point. And the rest, as they say, is history. After the reprimand, there was no turning back. Disillusionment hardened into bitterness. Arnold believed the Patriot cause had destroyed both his fortune and his reputation, despite his sacrifices of health, wealth, and years of service. In his mind, the revolution and even Washington himself had betrayed him. In May 1779, Benedict Arnold began secret efforts to defect by meeting Philadelphia merchant Joseph Stansbury. He carried Arnold's offer of service to the British authorities in New York. Despite Arnold's instructions to limit involvement, Stansbury contacted Loyalist intermediaries. And that led to an introduction to John Andre, the newly appointed British spy master. And with the approval of Sir Henry Clinton, they initiate a covert correspondence that would continue for more than a year. Using coded messages and invisible ink, often passed through social networks connected to Arnold's wife, Arnold began supplying the British with troops' positions, strengths, and supply depot locations. And by July 1779, he's negotiating payment for his services. He sought financial compensation for the losses he believed Congress owed him. Clinton focused on controlling the Hudson River Valley, pressed for intelligence on West Point, and eventually insisted on a direct meeting. By late 1779, talks stalled amid rising tensions. Patriot mobs targeted suspected loyalists in Philadelphia, and Arnold and his in laws faced threats. Congress and local officials refused his request for protection, deepening his alienation and helping push him further toward betrayal. In April to June 1780, Benedict Arnold learned that Philip Schuyler was proposing him for command of West Point. Arnold secretly reopened negotiations with the British, sharing his assessment of West Point and additional intelligence, including details of proposed Franco-American operations against Quebec. After inspecting West Point in mid-June, Arnold began liquidating his assets and transferring funds to London, signaling his commitment to defection. Arnold had arranged a face-to-face meeting with John Andre, Clinton's intelligence chief. They met secretly on September 21st, 1780, and Andre departed carrying plans for West Point. When Andre is captured near Tarrytown, the plot unravels. Although Arnold was warned in time and escaped to British lines, Arnold is still tried and executed. Washington reacted calmly to the betrayal and later remarked on the shock it caused. And efforts to capture Arnold failed, and Arnold publicly justifies his actions as motivated by loyalty to America rather than personal ambition. After defecting, Benedict Arnold received a British commission as brigadier general. But because his plot failed, he was paid far less than promised. In late 1780-81, he led British raids into Virginia, capturing Richmond by surprise and even devastating much of the countryside before withdrawing. His command ended when Charles Cornwallis arrived and took over, largely dismissing Arnold's advice and decisions that later contributed to the British defeat at Yorktown. Arnold later led a destructive raid on New London in September 1781 in his home colony, including the brutal assault on Fort Griswold, action that drew heavy British casualties and criticism. And the treason The blackest dye was the phrase George Washington and other continental leaders will use in the wake of Arnold's betrayal. Now, in wrapping up, I mean, Arnold will go on. He will commit the treason. It all goes down. But before that moment, we need to take note. Arnold took Ticonderoga. He endured the Kennebec. He fought at Quebec. He built a navy from nothing. He saved the northern colonies, and he broke Burgoyne at Saratoga. The revolution needed Benedict Arnold. It just didn't know what to do with him afterward. Today, his memory reflects that discomfort. At West Point, where Arnold once commanded and nearly changed the course of the war, his name does not appear like the others on a plaque honoring Revolutionary War generals. Arnold is remembered only as the American general. His name was never carved or was later scratched away, leaving behind a deliberate absence. That absence tells us something important. It shows how we often choose to remember history not as it was lived, but as we wish it had been. Clean, moral, uncomplicated. So I leave you with this. Is Benedict Arnold remembered for who he was or for what he became? And how many other stories do we simplify? Because complexity makes us uncomfortable. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John. That was great. I definitely did not know that much about Benedict Arnold coming into this, so I appreciate the wealth of information that you shared there. I think I speak for a lot of people here when I say that mostly just associating him as a as a traitor. So we do have a couple questions that did come into the Q&A as we were going through. So I am happy to read a couple of those for you
Sure.
and do your best. If you don't know the answer, obviously that's completely fine. We can look that up, send that afterwards. So did have a question about one of your first slides. And the question is the depiction of Benedict Arnold that from the very first slide. And the question was, I'm not familiar with that depiction. And do you know where that source came from?
The image of the monument.
Of Benedict Arnold himself, the first slide.
Oh, Benedict Arnold. That I've gotten off the Library of Congress. It's a portrait of Benedict Arnold. I've also found it on British military websites, history websites. It's an image of Benedict Arnold in his younger years. This is floating around the end of the French and Indian War and between that and the Revolution as his first taste into military ardor was, in fact, the French and Indian War. He had tried to run away twice from his apprenticeship under Daniel Lathrop, excuse me, as an apothecary before he sets off on that successful business. And he tries to go off and serve, and find the action. Both times he's brought back, he misses out. So this image is dating kind of around to that early days, just before his time into the revolution.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Next question. Joshua Het Smith was one of Arnold's loyalist helpers during his meeting with John Andre. Do you know if Smith was ever prosecuted for this?
He was not. Yeah, Smith escaped any prosecution. He
Okay.
certainly did not escape the ridicule. He was known, so going around town was not easy. But he was not brought forth on charges. He was not jailed, to the best of my knowledge.
Okay. Great. Could you speak just a little bit to Arnold's life after leaving for England? So I guess that post-Revolutionary War life.
Yeah. So following the end of the Revolutionary War, knowing he certainly does not have a place here, but even at that point, he knew he wasn't very welcomed in England, but he needed to go somewhere. He winds up back outside of London with what little money he could convince them to pay for his services. And little slice of land, but he ends up getting more in kind of a home within London itself. He's there making the home, but again, even to the British, everything that's happened, his name was first known to them as that indefatigable rebel, that thorn in our side. But now he's the traitor. What side? What kind of loyalties does he have? So following that, he tries to up and go to New Brunswick in Canada and start up a business there, get back into shipping and all. But still known there, business is unsuccessful in getting off the ground. People are harassing him. Even Peggy Shippen, his wife, she does not want to be there. So they will ultimately go back to London, sit out the rest of life in relative obscurity, kind of semi poverty. Now they are both buried side by side in kind of the crypt area of St. Mary's Battersea Church in London, England.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, good time for
Yeah.
a couple more questions here. So could you clarify what Arnold did to upset Reed, resulting in the court martial?
Yes. So one of the easiest things to do, I guess, say for that is Joseph Reed. He already has beef with George Washington. He was an aide under him early in the war, and he felt Washington maybe didn't listen to him much, or he felt he could do better. So Reed is done, and he'll go on into politics for Pennsylvania, and he comes into the role of governor for the colony just up to the time where Benedict Arnold has received his second wound. So he's effectively out of battlefield command. He's not going to be riding a horse, he's not going to be charging gallantly into battle anymore. But Arnold still knows this man, I'm sorry, Washington still knows this man is indispensable. And being that the British had just gotten done, because as he's fighting Burgoyne and Saratoga, Washington is trying to deal with Howe in Philadelphia. When the British, after a number of months occupying Philadelphia, they leave, the city, Washington wants to make sure it doesn't fall apart into like a post occupation chaos. So Arnold is the man tasked with jumping in and helping keep things in order. Joseph Reed, he is on a loyalist witch hunt by this point. So anyone with loyalist ties during that occupation, showing sympathies, helping the British, he's coming after them in law cases. He's going after their property and trying to seize it. Arnold kind of steps into that, and it's partially under Washington's orders to keep a balance between the populace. They know it's a fairly mixed one of, your loyalists, your patriots. You even have, with the large Quaker population there, neutral, pacifist. They're not choosing any side. So you have a kind of delicate balance, and Arnold's trying to keep that. Reed thinks he is just not being hard enough on loyalists. And then, of course, some of the charges that were valid, the ship pass for the Charming Nancy, commandeering the wagons, that really irked Reed as well. So he went right at Arnold full tilt.
All right, clears that up. All right, so we have time for two more questions. Um, so I had a couple in here about the influence of Arnold's wife and her family. And I was wondering if you could speak to the fact that did Arnold's wife and her family have any influence on his decision ultimately to, become that infamous traitor?
They would, and it was mostly be with Peggy. So her family, the Shippens in Philadelphia, they were prominent. But even at the outbreak of war, like her father tried to tiptoe delicately. He wasn't an outright loyalist, saying everything goes for the crown. The Americans should not have the United States. He is just in the middle, kind of walking the fence. But Peggy, during the British occupation, the young teenager wanted to have all this fun. There's all these military soldiers around. Balls are being had and events. She's a part of it. She starts connecting with John Andre, while they had these dances, these plays, and that begins setting up the correspondence. But her father, he wasn't too highly on that. The British will leave. And when Arnold comes in as the military governor for Philadelphia, that's when he begins courting Peggy. And by that point, Arnold had already well shown displeasure in the American cause. Peggy, he's sharing that with her as they're courting, and of course, when they wed. And she is like supporting him. I would not say she's outright saying, go to the British, go to the British. They were great. They had a fantastic party. You would love it. She essentially is supporting him, seeing where he's coming from, and she's got the connections to John Andre, and it starts setting up. And it's even said like when the exposure to the plot is revealed and Arnold is able to escape, Peggy is still pregnant with their second child, and she's got their first with them up there at the West Point garrison. So she is not going to be able to flee with him. So as the story goes, he abruptly runs up from their or their meal he's having, and he tells something to them. We don't know what. And then he races off, and he winds up back at the British lines in New York. Washington, who happened to be up at West Point inspecting the garrison, learns of the treason, comes to confront Arnold. He's not there, so he goes to like talk to Peggy, and Peggy just has a hysterical fit, screaming that Washington's going to try and take my baby from me. He's coming to get me. Just all this kind of just freaking out, this real breakdown. How much of that was fully brought on, we don't know, but we certainly know that Peggy was aware of the plot. She had the support because later on in their time in England, before she passed away, she was noted as having shared, her involvement, her role in that with friends in London. So she was there, loyal support on the side, but it was all Arnold really that drove himself to the treason.
All right. Thank you. So we have time for one more quick question here, and wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the monument that looks a bit like a fire hydrant.
Yes, the second picture up in the beginning. Yes, so that is a picture of Saratoga battlefield. You can find that. I made the visit, taking the picture. And this actually is what first piqued my interest. I'm walking around this battlefield as a little kid with my dad, and we're checking this stuff out. I'm like, why is there just a monument and a boot? And my dad went off on all it. And I was like, well, that's crazy. Oh, well, guess he must have done something bad. I left it at that. I started diving into, as we did today, his role in the early war and the amazing feats he pulled off. But this monument is an example that even though his treason created such enemies and now is given a synonymous phrase for Americans for treason, he his role was not ignored by those in the beginning. So they wanted to give him a monument for his role at Saratoga, because frankly, it doesn't happen without Arnold on both days. He was absolutely integral. So they want to give him a monument, so they do. And they feel a way to do that is to make it a monument of your foot. We like your foot better than you. Your foot is the real patriot. It served the cause. It was wounded. And this is kind of a monument and a snub all at the same time. No inscription, just this boot. I believe even back in the turn of the 20th century, it was reported that some college kids in the area had gone on and broke off a piece of the foot, the toe. It was eventually found and reinstalled, but it's going along, see the boot, and they knocked it right off.
All right. Well, with that, I think that's a good way for us to wrap up here. So we can turn it back over to Karen to close this out. And thanks very much, John.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Oh my goodness. I really just love the like like your boot better than you. Um, I love how the entire presentation, that's the real part that I'm holding deeply onto. It's so fantastic. I absolutely adore this presentation. Johnny did an incredible job. Honestly, the most I knew about Benedict Arnold was one treason and all my eggs Benedict that I get at brunch, because it's my favorite. So now I know so much more about him. And honestly, he was a schemer. If anyone's a Bravo fan, it's probably a scheme set up by Todd. That's probably just a joke for me. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you join us again in 2 weeks when we have the next presentation on the 28th, and it is In the Shadow of the Declaration. It's Boston's Hidden Architects of Americans' Freedom. And I put the registration link in the chat, and I'll be seeing you. This was awesome, and I'll see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.